So picture this. It's 1893, and Chicago is basically the center of the universe. The World's Fair is in full swing, and everyone is absolutely losing their minds over the White City.
Oh, totally. It was the first time people saw electricity on that kind of scale. You've got the giant Ferris wheel, these massive white buildings glowing at night. It was this huge, optimistic moment in American history.
Right? It felt like the future had finally arrived. But while the whole world was staring at the lights, something really dark was happening just a few miles away in the Inglewood neighborhood.
That's where Herman Webster Mudgett, or as history remembers him, H. Holmes, was putting the finishing touches on his own big project.
See, to the locals, he was just this charming, handsome doctor with a winning smile who ran the neighborhood drugstore. Everyone genuinely liked the guy.
He was the ultimate smooth talker, a real pillar of the community. And he used that charm to build the castle. It was this imposing 3-story building he told everyone was going to be a hotel for the millions of tourists pouring into the city for the fair.
But behind that facade of progress and hospitality, he'd designed a literal house of horrors. It's honestly wild how the peak of American optimism was hiding such a terrifying secret right in plain sight. So you've got to wonder, right? How do you even build a place this insane without the city or at least the neighbors getting suspicious?
Honestly, the way he pulled it off was a total masterclass in manipulation. Holmes was constantly hiring and then firing different construction crews like it was a game.
Yeah, I read about that. Like he'd have one team build out a long hallway, then fire them before the paint was even dry.
Exactly. Then he'd bring in a brand new crew to put a door at the end of that same hallway, but the door would just open into a solid brick wall. No one single person ever saw the full blueprint or understood how the rooms actually connected.
It ended up being this terrifying, chaotic labyrinth. We're talking stairways that lead straight into ceilings, rooms with no windows, and blind hallways that just end. It was a giant puzzle box full of traps.
And the kicker, he didn't even use his own money. The whole project was funded by a string of elaborate insurance scams and massive credit fraud.
So he literally built a monument to his own depravity on stolen cash. It's just wild how he managed to keep this scheme going for so long. Okay, we have to talk about what was actually going on inside those walls, because honestly, it sounds like something straight out of a high-budget horror movie.
Right? It wasn't just a quirky Victorian layout. Some of the guest rooms were completely soundproofed with asbestos, and others were literally lined with thick iron plates, just total isolation.
It's nightmare fuel. And get this, Holmes had gas lines piped directly into these rooms, all controlled by a series of valves hidden in his private office. He could just turn a dial and asphyxiate his guests whenever he felt like it.
It's like he was playing God from behind his desk. Then you've got these trapdoors hidden under the rugs and those famous greased wooden chutes. They dropped straight from the living quarters down into the basement.
It really wasn't a hotel at all, was it? It was a factory designed for the efficient disposal of human beings, all tucked behind a normal-looking facade.
Exactly. The sheer engineering of it is chilling. It was all about speed and silence, making sure no one ever saw what was happening downstairs.
So 1893 rolls around, and the World's Fair hit Chicago. It was honestly the perfect storm for a guy like Holmes. Just imagine the chaos. Millions of people pouring in. This massive, swirling crowd where it was so easy to just get lost.
Yeah, and a huge chunk of those folks were young women traveling solo for the very first time. They were looking for that new woman independence, maybe a job as a stenographer. They were brave, sure, but also super vulnerable in a city that big.
And Holmes, he was the ultimate predator disguised as this charming gentleman. He'd offer them a business opportunity or a cheap room at his hotel. But once they stepped inside, they were basically in a maze they couldn't escape.
It's the cold-bloodedness of the hustle that gets me. He wasn't just a killer, he was a con artist. He'd often pressure these women into signing over their life insurance or their savings before they vanished.
Right, and with a crematorium and acid vats in the basement, he was terrifyingly efficient at erasing the evidence. He eventually confessed to 27 murders, but some historians think the real number is over 200 just for that one summer. We'll never really know the full scale of it. So if the upstairs was a twisted maze, the basement, man,
The basement was where the real nightmare lived. It was basically a high-efficiency factory for making people vanish.
Honestly, it's chilling. It wasn't just a storage cellar. Holmes had a full-size crematorium installed down there. We're talking high-heat furnaces, fats of acid, and pits filled with quicklime. If you're not familiar, quicklime is this caustic chemical that can basically dissolve soft tissue in just a few days. It's the ultimate way to leave no trace.
It's so clinical and cold-blooded. But what really gets me is his little side hustle. He didn't always just destroy the evidence. Since he was a trained physician, he'd actually strip the flesh off his victims to clean the bones. Then he'd articulate the skeletons and sell them to medical schools.
Yeah, and that was a surprisingly lucrative business in the late 1800s. There was a constant demand for anatomical specimens, and no one asked too many questions about where they came from. To Holmes, these people weren't even human beings. They were just assets to be liquidated. And sometimes he took that term liquidated quite literally for a profit.
He really was a man who didn't let anything go to waste. It's like he saw the entire murder process as a bottom-line business. It's just incredibly dark.
So, after all that brilliant planning with the murder castle, you'd think Holmes would go down in some epic showdown, right? But no, his ego was actually his undoing, and it started with something as mundane as a horse.
A horse? Seriously? The guy who built a gas chamber hotel gets busted over a pony?
Right? It's so low stakes. Once the heat in Chicago got too intense after the fair, he headed down to Texas with his partner in crime, Benjamin Pittezel. But he just couldn't help himself. He got arrested for a relatively small-time horse swindle and ended up in a St. Louis jail cell.
I'm guessing he didn't just sit there quietly and wait for his lawyer.
Not a chance. He started bragging to his cellmate, a train robber named Marion Hedgepeth. Holmes laid out this massive plan to pull off a $10,000 insurance fraud. He even promised Hedgepeth a $500 cut if he helped hook him up with a shady lawyer.
Let me guess. Holmes got the money and totally ghosted him.
Exactly. Holmes skipped out on the payment, and a very bitter Hedgepeth decided to spill everything to the authorities. It's wild. The downfall of America's first serial killer started because he was too cheap to pay off a cellmate. That one debt was the thread that unraveled everything.
So that tip-off sparked a massive cross-country manhunt. The Pinkertons and a detective named Frank Geyer started tracing Holmes's steps, and this story gets really dark here.
It's gut-wrenching. Holmes had already killed his partner, Benjamin Pittezel, for insurance money, but then he basically kidnapped 3 of Pitzel's children.
He was playing this twisted game, too. He kept writing to their mother, telling her the kids were safe, while he was actually leading them to their deaths.
Detective Geyer was relentless. He eventually tracked Holmes to rented houses in Toronto and Indianapolis. In the cellars of those homes, he found the children's bodies.
That discovery changed everything. It wasn't just a fraud case anymore. It was a hunt for a monster.
Exactly. Finding those kids blew the whole case wide open. It sent investigators racing back to Chicago to finally tear into that murder castle and see the full scale of what was really hidden in the basement.
Man, it's wild how it all ended. At his trial, Holmes was just chillingly calm, like he was bored or something. He eventually confessed to 27 murders, but even then, he couldn't stop playing games with everyone's heads.
Oh, for sure. He actually told the press that some of his victims were still alive, just to mess with the investigation and create more chaos. And then there's that one line that still gives everyone the creeps. I was born with the devil in me. He totally leaned into that monster persona right until the end.
Yeah, talk about a dark legacy. He was finally hanged in 1896, but his paranoia didn't stop at the gallows. He was so terrified that someone would dig him up and dissect him, honestly a bit of a taste of his own medicine fear there, that he made this super weird final request.
Right. He insisted his coffin be encased in literal tons of concrete, just a massive solid block of stone so no one could touch him. It's wild to think that while Chicago was showing off the future of the world at the fair, Holmes was turning it into his own private, twisted hunting ground. He really remains one of the darkest figures in American history.